this is where this synergy has to be hand in glove between HR and FM. In my case, I was responsible for our facilities, and that reported into me. So I was really digging in deep to look at how can we work better together. But I think now more so than ever, I'm talking to more and more organizations that are reconfiguring their physical space because how they have had it configured in the past is not conducive to the work that employees are saying. We have a different kind of way that we're working now and a different way that we're collaborating with each other. So I think that there's this way for facility managers to really help HR to tackle some of these problems and for HR to do the same, right? I mean, to lean in and to help.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you're ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. In today's episode, Dean Stanberry, immediate past chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors, engages in a compelling discussion with Dr. Amy Dufrane, CEO of the Human Resources Certification Institute, HRCI. Together, they discuss IFMA's strategic partnership with HRCI, exploring the link between facility management and human resources, as well as the critical role of their collaboration in organizational efficiency. They also address the challenges of labor shortages, the evolution of personal training, and innovative strategies for workforce development. Now, let's get into it.
Hi, this is Dean Stanberry, immediate past chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors, and this is the Connected FM podcast. Today, we're joined by Amy Dufrane, CEO of the HRCI, or Human Resources Certification Institute. IFMA has a number of strategic partnerships we've entered into, and this is one of them. So we're here to talk a little bit about ways that FM and HR can interact. So HRCI has been around since 1973. They have over 500,000 people certified in 150 countries. And Dr. Amy Dufrane has her PhD in education and has worked in a lot of different scenarios and has been with HRCI since 2011. So Amy, why don't you tell us a little bit more about HRCI yourself and what interested the Institute in getting together with IFMA?
Dean, it's great to be here with you today. And, I'm really excited about our partnership with IFMA. And I think it became really important when you reached out and said, gosh, it'd be great for us to have some kind of a partnership and forge something together. Because in my background, I worked for an organization in which I was responsible for the organization's facility management process. We had tenants, we had buildings, we had all sorts of stuff. So to me, this seems like a natural collaboration to talk about ways that we can each, facility managers and human resources, can work collaboratively together to really rise and help our organizations be more efficient and effective. I, of course, answered your second question first, because that's what really excites me about this, is to have that partnership together. But at HRCI, we've been, as you said, doing this for 50 years. We're a certifying body for 4 decades. And over the past year, we've transitioned into more learning opportunities for HR and people managers. So we've got learning courses ranging the gamut of things that human resources are dealing with and are lucky enough to be a part of within the organization. So we have lots of learning opportunities, and we have webinars and community building resources and tools, and a really strong community of HR professionals around the world who are really interested in elevating their own capacity and capability as HR professionals. So I'm glad to be a part of the organization and really excited about this conversation today, because I think that it's natural that we talk about some of these things that are overlapping and ways that we can work even better together from a facility manager and an HR perspective.
And what drew you into HRCI?
Oh my gosh. Well, so naturally, I was certified before I became an employee of HRCI. I got my SPHR and was very passionate about how to continue to elevate myself as an HR professional, how to make sure that I was challenging myself. And like I tell people, I'm a learning junkie. I love to learn. And so this was the perfect place for me to work with the profession and continuing to elevate their game as professionals. I started in HR when it was very transactional. I was reflecting back on this. I had six of my colleagues in HR, and we all shared one computer when I started in HR. So we were fighting it out with, who's going to get the computer today and how can we make things work more efficiently and effectively? Thank goodness that job went away because no one wanted to do what I was doing when I started in my career over 30 years ago. But I think HR is such an amazing place to be. This is where you can really impact the business. And the most important resource of every company is its human capital. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us unique as companies. And I think that this is how we can really, change the face of the organizations that we work in. And I want to be a part of that and have been and really have enjoyed my journey at HRCI and in HR.
Absolutely. Just to add to that a little bit. So, those that know me know that I've had two careers. I started out in IT and then took that right turn into real estate facilities. But, once in real estate facilities, I kept hearing people say, we need IT and HR and real estate FM to work together. We're all support organizations. Mostly we're not the revenue generating parts of the business. We were there to support those parts of the business. And we've never really found that formula, I guess, on how should we make that work. And some of it's organizational, each group reports to different parts of the organization with different priorities. But I more and more, I see sort of a light at the end of the tunnel that says we are starting to bring these functions together because there is some overlap. There's some synergies that we must take advantage of. So with that, why don't we go ahead and dive into some of the questions that we'd kind of posed here. So the first one is really an issue for the FM and real estate industry. So FM and skilled trades are experiencing this generational shortage in young people joining these professions. While the boomers are, retiring, and that includes me, that is accelerating. But from HRCI's perspective, how does this compare with other industries? Are we alone in this, or are we among friends that are experiencing the same thing?
I think we're all in this together. This is such an unprecedented time that we're experiencing from a labor shortage perspective. According to some of the work by the Conference Board, we need an additional 4.5 million people entering in the workplace every year. And we don't have enough people. We don't have enough of those folks that are coming in to fill the gaps of workers that we need and the jobs that we need. So naturally, there's this discussion around AI. Well, is that going to, replace workers? And I think it will help with some of the shortage, but I think we've got to think more creatively about how do we fill some of these positions? What is it that we need to do to really look deeply at the labor shortages that are happening? And it's not just in the US, it's across the world. Although there are some countries that are doing better at filling, that have the capacity from a people perspective, they just don't have the jobs, like India being one of them. That's one of the countries that we're seeing, a plethora of people and not enough jobs. So how do we kind of marry those two things together with that sort of labor shortage perspective and combining that with the need for jobs to be filled? So I think there's some creative thinking that we've got to do across every one of our, on every position, every industry. We've got to think really creatively about how do we pull people in to our work organizations so that we can be productive. And 4.5 million, that's a lot of people to pull in every year. And then you see there's been a lot of data around the snake of sort of what our demography looks like, even from an age perspective. And there is a big dearth coming from just not enough people. And then you look at Generation Alpha, as they call themselves. So this is the generation that are in elementary, middle, high school right now, who will be the workers of tomorrow. And there's not enough. We have a birth shortage in the US and in other countries around the world. So this is a longer term issue that we're seeing hit every industry and many countries across the planet, for the number of jobs that we have and the number of workers that we need to fill them. So this is a challenge that we've got. And I think there's been a lot of research on some of the strategies that we can take, from a more economy perspective, from the US economy perspective, to sort of think creatively and think a little bit differently. But we've got some workers who are able-bodied workers who are on the sidelines right now. So how do we creatively think about pulling them in, from reskilling them to upskilling them to giving them some different options for childcare and elder care and some of those things that are really taking people and sidelining them out of the workforce, and they want to be in the workforce but just can't be because of pressures that are happening for themselves. So this is a problem that we've got, that we've got to be thinking really creatively about.
Yeah, and just to delve into the skill aspect of it. So we talk about skilled trades. These are typically positions that maybe went through an apprenticeship program or something, but certainly did not have an accredited degree associated with it.
Mhm.
And I'm going back in history now. So some of my experiences in either hiring or being hired, every application required, degree required. Now, you could have a degree in art history, which had absolutely nothing to do with the position you were being hired in, but that wasn't sort of
Right.
mandatory.
That's
So
right.
how are we looking at the skills and, again, accredited degrees going forward? Where do we see that there's an absolute need, and where is there maybe a little more latitude these days?
Yeah, you know what? I think that companies are really thinking creatively about talent and about hiring. And is that degree really essential for this job? Or can we skill people who are coming into our organizations? Can we give them on the job training? Can we give them skills and capabilities so that they can do the jobs that are necessary? So I think hospitals, essential workers, they're really doing some creative thinking about hiring nurses, and how are we pulling people into the hospital system and training them, even though they don't have a degree. They will eventually, but sort of creating a learning path for example, for nurses along this journey, so that they're gaining real skills, real world skills, and applying them in real time, and will eventually, get a degree, get that licensure, get that, sort of credential that they need behind their names in order to ensure that their skills and competencies are valid and are what a nurse should know in order to get the job done. So I think that's where organizations are really, they're questioning, as you just said, Dean, that is a degree really important for this job? And I think that's kind of, woven in with the cost of higher education, which in some cases, people are saying, I don't want to leave higher ed and have the debt that I have. So I'd rather be in a program that I can start contributing immediately and gain those skills and expertise. And maybe at some point in the path, get a degree if I find that I want to do that. But I think there are jobs that need to have degrees. But I think organizations are finding, gosh, we need workers more quickly than people are able to finish a degree program. And so we can train them. But I think the caution of that from an employee perspective is that you've got to then manage your own professional development in a much more focused way than people used to have to do this, because you want to make sure that the skills that you're getting and what the company is training you for are not going to be just for that organization, but will give you that ability to move up or to not lose your job because your company isn't focused on reskilling you. So I think there's sort of a push and a pull. There's the push from the company perspective, or a pull you in, and then employees are going to have to continue to push in getting their own professional development and upskilling themselves and making sure that they're sharp with what's happening in the workforce in whatever industry they're in.
It seems like it's a little bit of a return to what I would say occurred in the 60s and 70s. Large corporations used to do a lot more internal training.
That's right.
And of course, people were there, spent a lot of years there. That one aspect has changed considerably, but we're now seeing companies sort of acknowledging the fact that they're going to have to take some responsibility for providing some of that knowledge in order to get the people. What I considered when I got hired into the phone company years ago was they were looking for an aptitude, not
Mhm.
necessarily a specific skill set. Did you have the aptitude for this position?
Right.
And I think one of my favorite jokes is the CEO and the CFO having a conversation, and the CFO going, "What if we train all these people and they leave?" And the CEO just turns to him and says, "What if we don't train them and they stay?"
Right. 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 Right.
So I think there's that
That's right.
push-pull that you're talking about.
That's right. That's
Where does
right.
that push-pull come in? So
I think, Dean, you're spot on. I think organizations are looking at that recreation of training centers and creating their own centers so that they can ensure that their employees, particularly, I just think about companies like PwC and Deloitte that are investing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in their training centers right now, and they're expanding them. And what does that look like? And because their employees are saying, we need more. We need more investment in us, and to make sure that we're really, our skills are sharp and we're delivering the best value to our customers.
yeah, not surprising with the consulting firms. I was quite surprised when AI really kind of came into being, and all of a sudden we've got all these experts in AI. I'm going, where was
Right. That's
amazing?
right.
Momentum.
Everybody's an expert.
IFMA's Knowledge Library is the largest digital collection of quality content specific to the built environment, featuring hundreds of articles, case studies, research reports, videos, and templates. It has helped thousands of facility management professionals learn and leverage FM best practices. It's also 100% free to IFMA members. Visit knowledgelibrary.ifma.org to learn more.
So we talked about, the relationships between functions, FM and HR. So do you have any advice on how facility managers can go about forging a collaborative partnership with their HR team, to improve, workplace wellness, well-being? Those are the intersections, I think, where the functions come together.
Yeah, really, this is such an interesting time that we're in. You look at how work is getting done, and it's so different because of the impact that COVID has on our work perspective. There's a whole new, sort of genre of people who are emerging, really figuring out, how are people working? How can we help them to work more effectively in their roles? What's the configuration they need from a technology perspective, from a physical workplace perspective? And how do we make sure that we're setting up work so that it's safe? At HRCI, we just did a webinar on how do we make sure that, as sort of our climate change is occurring, how do we really look at those people who are, their job requires them to be outside? How do we reduce risk for them? How do we make sure that they're in a place that, obviously some of these roles, they've got to be, really out in the elements. And so how can we create healthy environments for them to work in? And so I think that this is where this synergy has to be hand in glove from between HR and FM. In my case, I was responsible for our facilities. and that reported into me. So I was really digging in deep to look at how can we work better together. But I think now more so than ever, I'm talking to more and more organizations that are reconfiguring their physical space because how they have had it configured in the past is not conducive to the work that employees are saying. We have a different kind of way that we're working now and a different way that we're collaborating with each other. People are on the road a lot more than they have been before. They're having to work in an airport or in their car, at their van as they're driving to the next job. How can we create spaces so that folks can work together and we're creating that space where somebody feels like my organization really cares about me. They care about how I'm getting work done. And is this the comfortable space to work in? So I think that collaboration and synergy needs to continue to happen as we're rethinking that workspace. We're thinking about, workplace safety. We're thinking about risk mitigation. And, I think when I was walking around the IFMA show last year, I saw it was like a sled that you could get somebody who was in a wheelchair downstairs in the case of some sort
Yeah.
of a building emergency. And I'm like, I had no idea something like that existed. We had a sled, but this is a really cool mechanical configuration. I want to see how it works. And had I known that, oh, that would have been amazing for us to have that because we had somebody that was in a wheelchair who was on an upper floor and we were in Washington, D.C. and all the time there always something that happens with facilities. And gosh, I wish that we had known that. So I think that there's this way for facility managers to really help HR to tackle some of these problems and for HR to do the same, right? I mean, to lean in and to help. And you're the expert from a facility management perspective. So I'd love to ask you that question. How can HR better support, sort of that facility manager? What are the things that facility managers are asking for from HR that isn't getting back to HR professionals? Because I'd love to be able to share this with, the HR community.
Well, one of the surprising things that came out of COVID, as we are looking at it in the rearview mirror, is this sort of emerging trend. There's a heightened awareness of your indoor environment from workers.
Hmm.
So it's no longer, when we used to talk about indoor environmental quality, it was just air quality. But now we're looking at cleaning, and it also involves not only physical well-being, but mental well-being. Now,
Right.
those are skills that FMs have never had as part of their core competencies. It was not part of their responsibilities. But now, as we're looking at designing and configuring and operating spaces, how do we lean into that? And that's where there's some, help needed. I heard a statistic, this is a while ago now, that the number of people coming out of, say, graduating college or joining the workforce has a higher incidence of, mental health issues.
Yes.
I'm going, talk about a
Yes.
pre-existing condition. And,
Yeah.
you know, didn't get help, help from the parents, didn't get help from the school system, education system. Now it's the employer's issue, but it is what it is. We are now having to deal with those kinds of scenarios in order for work to occur.
That's right.
So I think that's a new need. And on the flip side of that, on the HR side, you need to learn those HR professionals need to learn a little bit more about, the workplace environments and what is possible than they needed to know before. So I think there's learning on both sides that needs to occur so that
Right.
we can speak a common language, speak the
That's
same
right.
language when we're
That's right.
talking about what can we do to make it better for the benefit of those occupants.
Yes. It's so true. And I think that we are seeing that your mental health statistic, it is, I'm sure, under inflated now as we're seeing the magnitude of, you know, mental health be even more of, kind of falling in the domain of the employer to work around and work with and to try to, pull in resources to help when there are mental health challenges, substance abuse disorder. I've been working with an organization all around sort of substance abuse, and they're realizing, gosh, we did some research around this, but we need to make sure we're pulling HR in and we're having conversations around this. So there's again a lot more to be uncovered and discovered around collaboration in all of those areas.
Absolutely. Let's move into, the last question that we had here. I do have one that I want to bring back up before we leave because it was something you started with that triggered a thought. Do you have any advice for facility managers or in the hiring process? How are credentials viewed? And it's relatively recently that we're producing graduates with degrees in FM. And how can we get these mid-career FM professionals to continue to compete in that job market?
Right. I think that's a great question. And firstly, I started the top of our discussion saying I'm a learning junkie. And I believe that anything I can do to inspire people to invest in themselves is a home run, 100%. We've done some research in our 5 decades of being around. We know that individuals who are getting certified, and this is without a degree or not. So individuals that are investing in themselves from a certification perspective make more money. They are promoted faster than another person who isn't certified. Their supervisors report that they're more efficient and effective in their roles. They're happier in their jobs. They're excited to come to their jobs every day. And we've done some research looking at it from an employer who has a handful, more than 5 people who are certified on their teams. And we're looking at this strictly from an HR perspective. But we know that organizations that have more than 5 people certified have better stock performance, better Glassdoor ratings, and their revenues are higher than an organization that doesn't. So there's a value proposition both from an individual and an organization to invest in getting people certified. Again, I take this from an HR perspective, but as a hiring manager, so I talk to thousands of hiring managers every year, and they really look for individuals that have that intellectual curiosity, are continuing to advance themselves by putting whatever letters they are behind their name and making sure that those letters have credibility, right? So you don't want to put a letter behind your name that's just, from someplace, an internet, course that you took and it took 5 minutes. You really want an organization that has a strong brand who sees the value and credibility in certification. I think obviously I'm biased. Part of what we do is certification. But as I talk to hiring managers, they say, I want those folks that are investing in themselves. I want those people who believe that they're their best and most important resource, and that's what they're going to invest in from an individual perspective. So I think that hiring managers look for that. They, of course, look for degrees in some of these highly technical kinds of roles that are out there. They want to make sure that they're hiring people that know what they say they know. And I think, although the higher education degree is great, I think having the validation from an external organization who has people that developed that certification who are doing the job, not brand new to the job, but they've been doing this for a number of years, who are saying, this person really does know what they say that they know, and they're going to add value to your organization. So I feel like as we've got new folks that are coming into the workforce, those are going to be the people that the mid-career people will be competing against. And if they don't hold a certification and a person who's newer to the workforce does, that may be the marker of hiring. We all see the job placements that say either required or preferred for certifications. And I think organizations that understand the value and the credibility that having a certification brings to their company, they're going to be more apt to hire those folks over somebody that doesn't. So I think it's an important marker, irregardless of what it is that you're doing. Even when you look at, technology, there's a number of certifications that are out there. And there are always, IT folks who are continuing to invest in getting those credentials because they know that they hold value and that the employer places a lot of credibility on those. So I think people should continue to invest in themselves. I'll say it over and over again.
Yep. Lifelong learning. We've been
That's right.
preaching that mantra for a while now and saying, this is a profession of lifelong learning. There's
That's
always
right.
something new coming out. And, if you choose to just be stagnant, then chances are you're left behind.
That's right. That is
So
exactly right.
there was one other little thought that you triggered when you first started talking. So one of the artifacts of the old school organizations, you used to get mentored on being a manager, a supervisor, right? So even if you have a degree and you happen to take an HR or management class, I kind of equate that to, it's like you can know all the rules of golf, but it doesn't matter until you get out and try to hit a ball, right?
That's right. That's
And the
right.
same thing applies here. If you're going to manage people, it's very different when you actually get into that role. And I have a book on my shelf that there's a quote in there that says, everybody wants to be a leader. Nobody wants to be a manager.
Right.
And the thought being that management is equated to being bureaucratic and, that's not the fun part. The fact is, if you're in those roles, you have to do both.
That's right.
At some point you have your leader hat on, another point you have your manager hat on. Now, you mentioned that you were doing some additional training. Is some of the training that HRCI is doing, is that touching on some of the leadership and management skills that you don't get anywhere else these days?
Yes, they are. And we have new courses coming out all the time that are really pushing those folks who need to know more about HR, who are not in HR itself. And I think that from an HR perspective, we're seeing HR be much more strategic than ever before. They're really working to lean into the business and on the business function. So some of those transactional responsibilities are falling to the manager to work on those things and to do those things. So those people managers, so they've got to know what great HR looks like because they're going to be challenged to make sure that they're doing those responsibilities from an HR perspective to ensure that they're coaching their employees, that they're giving them professional development opportunities, that they're ensuring that compensation is effectively managed, that you're always setting those goals and making them SMART goals so that it's not a smushy goal, but it's really clear and what success looks like. So I think those are all things that we look at and things that we're doing at HRCI to ensure that people managers can be more efficient and effective in what they do.
Okay. Well, I think we're at time. So is there any closing comments that you want to offer up to our IFMA members?
Yeah, I'd love for them if they have an opportunity. We have a free webinar that we do on Thursdays at 1:00 Eastern time. We have up to 5,000 folks that we've got that participate in the webinars. We've got folks from around the world, and it's not just HR focused. There are people management sorts of topics. So everything that we talk about, you will learn something from. So I encourage you to share in and participate when you can in our webinar series. It's Alchemizing HR, and you can learn more at hrci.org.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today. This has been very enlightening, and I'm excited to see what IFMA and HRCI can do together going forward.
That sounds great.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.